Alright, welcome to the reveal of the build. I've been playing in Essence League. This character is a Shadow. He is a Trickster, and his main skill is Arc. Now, this build utilizes two core uniques. One of them is new, and there's a bunch of cool mechanics I've had interact to be able to make this work. There may be some changes from here, we'll see, but for now, this is going to be what the build is. So this build relies on two core items. The first one is the real core of the build, and the second one is an enabler for the whole thing to work. So this core item is Kitava's Thirst Zealot Helmet. So as you can see, it's got some reduced cast speed, armor and ES, max mana, and here's the key thing: 30% chance to cast socketed spells when you spend at least 100 mana to use a skill. So the basic idea of the build is we cast very rapidly, just with a typical damage skill, and then in this case again it's Arc, at least for now it's Arc. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then this will, 30% of the time, this will trigger all of our support skills and damage buffs that are contained in the helmet. Now, in order to enable this to work, the other item that you need is Voidbringer Conjurer Gloves. Okay. Now, the key thing here is 80% increased mana cost of skills. This enables you to get the mana cost of your skills over 100 and therefore enable the helm to actually trigger when you cast spells. So for example, you saw there when I cast Arc, there was a shock around me and Molten Shell appeared. So that was the triggering of the helm, and there was again. Now, you can get this to work as early as level 55, the required level to actually equip Voidbringer. In order to do that, at the time I had an Arc, Lightning Pen, Control Destruction, and a Spell Echo all socketed in the Voidbringer. The key thing is you have to get in. You have to have a high enough level skill such that the mana cost is multiplied to actually be high enough to be over 100. But the build works from level 55 on if you assuming you have your Voidbringers and your Kitava's Thirst at that time. Now, my current mana cost on Arc is 136, and none of my other skills, aside from my auras, oddly enough, have a high enough mana cost to trigger it. So when you turn on your auras, since they cost over 100 mana, in my case, it'll occasionally set off the spells, which is kind of funny. Alright, so the next thing I thought of when I was making this build is, well, am I going to be able to rely on Kitava's Thirst, our helmet here, as a main source of damage? And my answer to that was no. It's a secondary source of damage and also a source of utility. But in order to make it as powerful as possible, I need to maximize my cast speed, and I also need to be able to have a high level of mana regeneration to be able to sustain 100 mana plus, in this case 136, and I'm casting this almost 5 times a second before I have any buffs. So there's one big thing that enables us to do this, and this has to do with our choice of our class. So if we pull up the passive tree here, again, you can see that I am a Trickster. Now, there's a few big things about Trickster that really enable this build, and the main one here is Weave the Arcane. So we got max mana regeneration rate, but the big thing is we have a 20% chance to recover 10% of our maximum mana whenever we use a skill. That could be our movement skill, which is Swirling Blades, or our main skill, Arc. 10% of my max mana is about 173 or 174, which is more than the mana cost of the Arc. It's important to note that when you're using Spell Echo, as I am, it only counts the mana cost for the first cast of the skill. If you don't use it, you can potentially proc the helm faster, but I've done the math and it's actually more DPS total to just use Echo anyway. So this enables us to have a lot of mana and also recover our mana and maintain it. And then another thing that's really nice is Walk the Aether. So I remember I said that we want really high cast speed. Well, by using Walk the Aether, our Whirling Blades is free, and it also makes us use itself faster and our ups our cast speed a lot. So you can use it to recover your own mana, and you just want to make sure you're using it occasionally in combat to make sure your cast speed is up. And if you're playing the build competently, this build requires a lot on manual evasion to dodge, and being able to reposition with a fast Whirling Blades is quite good. The other key things with the Ascendancy, these aren't really key so much as they are utility. You have Swift Killer to gain some frenzy charges, that's just more damage, and then I have taken Ghost Dance for some dodge and some move speed. It's possible that you could just not take the frenzy charges and jump into Shade Form for some extra defense, and then that's questionable. I would consider if I was going to play this build CI, but again, this is the start of the league, and my gear is relatively dumpster. So I haven't had the gear to be able to play CI. I'm not sure if I would really want to play this build CI because life flasks are one of our saving graces against Reflect, which I will talk about eventually. I have thought about using Patient Reaper, because this will give us more life leech, mana leech. I'll talk about how I get those eventually too, and the energy shield recovery from the Voidbringers. But the issue is that in order to get this to proc, I need added fire damage to spells, so enemies will ignite when I crit them, and then this would work. But I don't really think it's consistent enough, and it definitely won't work against bosses at the time when you really need your leech the most. So again, core things here: Weave the Arcane, Walk the Aether. When I was leveling, I took Walk the Aether first because I wasn't a high enough level to have the high mana cost of skills, so I didn't need Weave the Arcane. So in terms of your priority when you actually ascend the character, you want Walk the Aether first, Weave the Arcane second, and then you want to take Swift Killer and Merciless, and then if you do the endgame lab, which I did, perfectly solo, it was fine. Then you take Ghost Dance for your last point. Alright, so other things on the tree, you can see we've pathed out through elemental damage through the cast speed nodes, and then general shadow things, life, cast speed, critical chance, jump into some life and ES here. This is a hybrid build, as you can see. I'm mostly life, but I have a nice ES pool. And I drop down through here for the life nodes. We drop through these nice life and ES nodes for the spell critical cluster here. It's important to note that if you actually want to maximize your DPS with crit spells, you need to get critical multiplier, so I've taken these critical multiplier nodes instead of the critical strike chance to get to Doomcast. As we come in here, we also get more cast speed here, as well as into Witch for life and mana. Now, since Arc is not an AoE skill, I have not passed through the area of effect nodes, and have instead passed through practical application for stats and some avoid stun. If you were to use another skill, which I'll talk about in a bit, then these might become more practical. And then we pass through the power charges into the lightning penetration in the lightning wheel here. And then one of the really cool things I've done to get some very efficient movement from Whirling Blades is I am dual wielding. I'm using a Doriani's Catalyst and a good Spell Dagger. This could be better, obviously, but it's still relatively early in the league. And since I'm dual wielding, that lets me use the Dark Arts cluster. So we got Dark Arts, and then its leading in nodes give us a total of 24% attack speed and 20% cast speed, along with 20 dex. It's very efficient for the number of points you can get, and if you're like someone who likes to move around quickly with Whirling Blade as well as cast quickly on a caster build, I highly recommend this. It's also very good on this build. We got the life and mana here, spell crit, fairly self-explanatory. In this jewel socket here, we use anatomical knowledge. This is pretty much the best place to put it because there's a whole bunch of intelligence from Occultist Dominion as well as the pathing nodes. If I actually went down, I could pull a little more life out of this. I think it'll go up to 23 with these two intelligence nodes, but there's not really much need for this build to go down there. Then we path into Templar for more cast speed, life. I'm taking this for ES and life regeneration, but it's mainly for the ES and the stats. The life regeneration is nice because having a little bit helps keep you topped off. We have elemental damage into this nice life wheel here, and the spell damage wheel here. Then I go up through this life and chaos resistance, which is actually important against a lot of the new bosses, into this spell critical chance and multiplier cluster here. Now, I've been thinking about, in later levels, pathing into this elemental damage wheel for some more damage and elemental penetration. If I was to do that, I could connect 2 nodes from here, and then I could take this, and then I could drop these 2 strength nodes and save a point, which I could then put somewhere else. This character's currently level 88, by the way. And his bandits are Oak in normal for life, Alira. No, I did not help Alira. I killed all the bandits in Cruel for a passive point because I can get better than 5% cast speed from a node. Like this is better than 5% cast speed. And then in Merciless, I helped Alira for a power charge, so I have 5 power charges. Total, I can get a 6th one here if I want, and then also if I take this pathing into this wheel, that opens up this one for a potential 7th power charge. That about covers it for the tree, but again, this is something you'll have to see in action, and I'll talk about some other things as well. So, gear choices. I've already talked about the helmet and the gloves. Let's talk about our chest. So I'm currently using a good, it's just a good chest that can easily roll 5 blue sockets with a good life roll. And having the ES is nice because, again, I've liked the hybrid because the shield gain on kill from this is quite nice. And you need like a 5 blue to make this build really work. And if you had a 6 link, I would either add in life leech or maybe critical strike chance if I was going for more damage. But it depends on what skill you're using, and I'll talk about that after this. So I use arc, controlled destruction, lightning penetration, spell echo, and faster casting. The goal is pretty much just to spam the heck out of the skill. This also holds my lightning golem. It makes its attack and cast faster, so more DPS and faster movement from our whirling blades. And then, so weapon choice. So you can dual wield daggers if you want, but I've opted to use Doriani's Catalyst because this has a very immense amount of elemental damage as well as an elemental leech. And it also has the ability to roll red sockets easily, which daggers do not, which lets us run a cast when damage taken, increased duration, immortal call. Now, one of the very important things on this build is life and mana leech, which helps you keep up your mana and your life when you don't have, when you're not getting lucky from Weave the Arcane, and it's pretty much our main source of life sustain aside from our flasks. So we get our life leech from Orb of Storms, Curse on Hit, Warlord's Mark, and Power Charge on Crit. So the Orb of Storms will generate power charges with power charge on crit, and then it'll curse enemies to give us life leech and mana leech, and also grant us endurance charges. And arc, with this high damage and cast speed, frequently will stun pretty much any non-boss mob in most maps, from what I've seen so far. There have been a few differences in my setup as I've experimented, but the one here is the most effective one I've found so far. So then again, offhand is a good spell dagger. The essences in the Essence League make it fairly easy to craft good daggers, and obviously I can make a better one, but this is the best one I have right now. This contains my auras, Herald of Thunder, Clarity, and Arctic Armor. I originally ran Warlord's Mark on Blasphemy, but then I found that I did not survive as well as I would have liked, so I moved it into a Curse on Hit for Arctic Armor. And finally, in my boots here, I've got a pretty good pair of two-tone boots that I found, and these hold Whirling Blades, Faster Attacks, Fortify, and Culling Strike. So I've put in Culling Strike because it matched the colors of the boots, and also it's really nice to be able to kill bosses like Zaro. But if you didn't want to run this, you could use another movement skill in its place. I would highly recommend Leap Slam if you're using a Doriani's, because that'll let you cross gaps, which Whirling Blades is not. Also, when this gets 20 quality, it'll give us more attack speed. which will be really nice to move around faster. Jewelry, you just want to look for life, potentially damage on your amulet, and then basically cover your resistances. My jewelry is not particularly good right now. My belt's pretty good, but again, those upgrades will come with time. And then for flasks, so running a topaz flask is absolutely key in this build. You need one because of reflect. When reflect hits you, it hurts pretty hard usually. Well, most of my deaths this league have been from me hitting reflect packs that I either wasn't paying attention to, or me not responding with life and topaz in time. You need to pop your topaz flask initially to reduce the damage, and then once your ES drops, you need to pop a life flask. And I use a Surgeon's Eternal Flask. This is the fastest recovering flask in the game that you can have with Surgeons, and I could have a better mod on there, but I haven't had a chance to roll it. I use an Onslaught Flask to remove curses, and also makes me attack and cast faster. Then I have Instant Recovery, Anti-Freeze, and then I have an Anti-Bleed Sulfur Flask. Sulfur Flask is pretty much the only flask that can actually increase our DPS without being unique, aside from Onslaught, and I found them to be pretty useful. That should about cover it for gear and things, but basically, this character, he's quite fast in terms of his Whirling Blade speed, and my tooltip on Arc, when I don't have any charges, is at 26k. When I'm fully charged with all my power charges and frenzy charges and endurance charges, and I pop both my damage flasks, I'm over 40k tooltip on that. But the basic playstyle of the build is you whirl around the map. When you see a pack, you drop your Orb of Storms, and you just cast Arc until the thing dies. Against bosses, what you want to do, imagine this totem here is an enemy. Well, that doesn't work. Imagine the golem is an enemy. Typically, I whirl back and forth across them to dodge their attacks, which leaves chilled ground from the Arctic armor underneath them, which makes them chilled. It also procs Fortify, and is generally quite effective at that. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was other skills. So, other skills you can potentially use to proc your Kitava's Thirst. I'm using Arc right now. I've tried Ball Lightning. It doesn't work as well as I would like in terms of clear speed. When I'm fighting at Ziri, which I eventually plan to do, I plan to use a Shock Nova, because this won't chain to the mirrors, and then we can just spam it like this. Now, one of the important things to note for skills like, now my original plan when I got Kitava's Thirst was I was just going to suck at 3 arcs in it and it would be great. Well, Kitava's Thirst is subject to the 1 unique spell per trigger, so if you have 3 arcs, you only trigger 1 of them. So that's why we have Arc, Shock Nova, Molten Shell, Lightning Pen, and Kitava's Thirst. So Molten Shell gives us a lot of nice defensive utility and a massive nuke when enemies actually are hit by it. As you can see, average damage is 17k when I'm not charged, which is pretty darn high. Yeah. Now, the final alternative is actually using Stormcall. Now, I don't have a little Stormcall gem yet, but of all the lightning skills that are potentially viable between Arc and Shock Nova, it has the lowest based cast time of half a second. Shock Nova has 3/4 of a second, and Arc has 8/10 of a second as their base cast time. So So Arc followed by Shock Nova, and then Stormcall in order from slowest to fastest has their base cast speed. So I'm currently leveling a Stormcall gem, and when I have it to a high level, I will test it to see if it actually works well to proc Kitava's Thirst and clear at the same time. And if I do end up finding that Stormcall works better, I will grab the area of effect nodes in both the Witch and Templar areas. But until then, it's Arc all day. Alright, so yeah, that's the basic theory of the build. I'm going to show you a little gameplay here, and you can see what the build does. Before I go into any of the maps I'm running, so currently I'm up to about tier 10 in the Atlas, so that's just pretty much as high maps as you're going to see me play. But generally, the traits of this build, it clears very quickly and safely on your typical trash in the maps, and then it's a little slower on bosses because its single target isn't godlike. And then map mods to avoid 100%, never play elemental reflect mod maps. You will kill yourself, and I would highly recommend not playing hexproof maps because you will have problems with maintaining your life and mana because you won't have the curse to give you your life leech. Alright, so for the map portion, I'm going to run at tier 9. This is about where I'm at right now. I've got 9s and 10s are pretty much what I'm working on in the Atlas at this point. Now, if I've already completed a map, I run them blue, just for safety. So I'm going to run this multifarious reef map of vulnerability, and you'll kind of see how the build plays. Alright, here's Vol. He's dead. It's almost an instant melt. Alright, and that should do it for this build for now. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, concerns. You can post them in the thread or on this video, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say, and talk to you later. Thanks. See ya.